So there are two types of people. You have people who have no issues feeding themselves. Every single day they'll gladly do it. There's no struggle, or if there is struggle, there's a little. It's like a little and not a lot. And then you have those for whom feeding yourself is hard labor because sometimes deciding what to eat is the hardest part. And that's what I mean by saying feeding yourself is hard labor. But it's not for the reason you think it is. It's not because they don't like food. I'm speaking specifically to those to my neurodivergent folks like myself. Sometimes eating, honestly, is the hard part. And it's not because I don't like food. I work with food. You see me present food. I talk about food all the time. I create meals every single day. But honestly, if I were being honest, some days deciding what to eat is the hard part. So much so that I will ask my husband, "What do you want to eat?" And he will often decide what I'm going to make for dinner, and specifically what I make for him. Because sometimes he will say something, and I'm like, "Nah, I'm not eating that," and I end up making something anyway. But the point I'm making is the hardest part is deciding what to eat, and it's not because I don't like food. Today I'm going to share a few reasons why neurodivergent folks or people like me tend to have this struggle. Again, I'm using my notes because I want to keep this nice and succinct. Uh, Number one is we're always making decisions, like constantly having to make decisions on what to eat throughout the day. It doesn't end. I mean, the decision isn't just what to eat, the decision is what sounds good versus what's available, um, what takes the least effort, what is sounding, well, I could say what's sounding good, but I already said that. But yeah, it's just a constant decision making throughout the day. And sometimes you're like, man, I'm just tired. I don't want to do that. So yes, you could easily make call takeout, but if you've ever gone into a takeout app as somebody who deciding on what to eat is hard. If you've ever gone into a takeout app and then gone through all the options and then work that against what you're feeling for or what you have to consider. So if you have dietary restrictions, what you have to consider, eventually you end up be like, okay, I'm either not going to eat anything or I'm going to grab the first thing I can find, especially when you get to the point of being hungry. So that constant decision making throughout the day, every single day, that can create some friction. The second thing is that planning meals in general requires a level of executive function that if you have executive dysfunction can take a toll, can be very heavy cognitively because planning meals, when you talk about planning meals, we're talking about organizing, prioritizing. You're talking about looking ahead as far as what your energy levels might be like. It's remembering the ingredients. It is managing time and remembering time or considering time. It's anticipating what is going to happen when it's time to cook and looking a couple steps ahead because that's how our brains work. And like I said, this can be heavy on the brain. This is cognitive load. This cognitive load can be heavy. And when you have executive dysfunction, that heaviness is heavier. So that's the second reason that we face this situation of struggling to decide on what to eat. And then when you talk about grocery shopping, the hardest part of grocery shopping, or put differently, grocery shopping starts long before you even step foot in the grocery store, or open up the app to purchase your groceries if you use a grocery app or if you do grocery pickup. Because with grocery shopping, you have to do inventory. That means checking your fridge and your pantry to see what ingredients you have. You have to remember ingredients. You have to then plan the menu. Then you have to think about the budget that you have. Then you have to look at what you might cook versus what you might not cook and what you have to do with that. What do you do with that? That in and of itself happens before you go grocery shopping. So again, grocery shopping takes mental work, which in and of itself can create fatigue. Because when that mental load or when that mental exhaustion kicks in physically, it drains you. Or put differently, mental exhaustion has a compounding effect, in my opinion, on physical exhaustion. So you might not physically be tired, but because you're mentally tired, then it manifests itself in physical exhaustion. And it is extremely heavy and tiring. I don't wish it on anybody. If you experience that, I commiserate, and I'm sending you good vibes anytime that happens. Take a nap. Hopefully you can take a nap. And then because that's the kind of load that takes place and it's from grocery shopping. Imagine what happens in cooking itself. Now, whereas grocery shopping or planning groceries or grocery shopping starting from the planning stages, in cooking itself, this is another reason. Cooking itself requires your attention in multiple ways. And this again adds another layer of fatigue, adds another layer of energy usage or using up energy, because when you're cooking, you have to think about the fact that you might have to keep your eyes on multiple things. You might have to watch a timer. Now, I have a watch that I set a timer, sometimes multiple timers when I'm doing several parts to a meal or I'm doing multiple things at the same time. Then you have those of us who will multitask or try to multitask while cooking. It doesn't matter if it's the simplest of dish or laziest of dish to the most complex. Some kind of split attention happens during that process. And that can feel like a lot on any given day, not just on a day when you've had a long day after work. That can happen on any given day where you need to actively make something for yourself to eat. So whether you're planning for the next couple of meals or preparing for the next couple of meals, or you're making a meal in the moment, needing to have your attention in multiple places whilst doing so can feel like a lot. And then on Threads, this is the next point. On Threads, I see this often and it makes me chuckle every time I see it. When someone will come on and say, being an adult is realizing that you have to feed yourself every single day. It's realizing that you have to do this every day. And I always laugh and commiserate because same friend, same. Yes, like many other things, you have to do. But this is just a reality of what goes through the heads of those of us who sometimes struggle with deciding on what to eat. You have to do this every day. It's a repetitive cycle, for want of a better word. And sometimes that cycle can create fatigue. It's, on the one hand, repeating the meal making or needing to feed yourself thing can create fatigue, but it's the very same repetition that creates what's the word? That repetition creates routine, and that routine is like guardrails sometimes for when you're extremely tired and you don't want to make a decision or can't because you have decision fatigue. you already have that decision made for you because of that routine. So, for example, if you are going to the grocery store, although why you would do this on a day when you're low energy, I don't know. But if you happen to make a quick trip to the grocery store, unprompted trip to the grocery store, and you know you need to get some protein, some fiber, maybe some carbs, there are certain carbs that you might typically get and certain proteins that you would typically get. Knowing those things, so if you know you always get chicken and fish, you know that's one less. You don't have to make that decision. You already know that's what you would get. If you know you normally buy 3 cans of black beans, you know on a short trip, quick trip, unprompted, that's what you're going to get to make it easier. You know that the easiest vegetables is probably some bag salad, you know, or some lettuce, different red leaf or green leaf lettuce, you know, one of those two. So the decisions have been pre-made because it's routine for you. So on the one hand, the routine of feeding yourself every day can create fatigue. And on the other hand, it's a very routine that can sometimes save you, sometimes help you get fed. So it's a catch 22. But those are a couple of reasons. And one thing I want to remind you is that social media really just shows the highlight reel of what it takes to feed yourself. You really don't see the invisible parts of it. And this is not to say that we don't know that the invisible parts exist, but it's to say, let's be honest about what it takes. If you've ever watched any of those "What I Eat in a Day" videos, this is an example of that, where they just show you all of these meals. This is what I eat in a day or what I eat in a week. But the process it takes to create those meals over that day, or throughout that week, it's probably a process that you might not have the capacity for in any given moment, or stuff that you might not want to do. So it's remembering that social media only shares the highlight reels of what it takes to feed yourself. They don't share the realistic moments. And uh, real, it seems so simple in a lot of them, and they may very well be. But like I said, for those of us who struggle with this, that invisible labor, or that invisible parts of it, can have a greater impact on us, no matter, or never mind the fact that we can create some beautiful meals out of it. It's invisible part that we would be concerned about, or that would impact us in a way that makes us not nourish ourselves. And so this is why I talk all the time about staying curious about food, about being flexible with food, because if there's anything else I've learned, it's that, or if there's nothing else I've learned, one thing I have learned is that realistic meals are never perfect. You have your high energy days and you have your low energy days. And feeding yourself based on that capacity, if you've not prepped ahead of time, is you doing the best you can. And so the goal really with me sharing things like this is to lessen the friction around what you think nourishment needs to be for it to feel supportive of you, instead of it just feeling like, okay, I failed like this again because I wasn't able to have my 3 big balanced meals for the day, when the overall picture might look like I'm having it on some days and on some days I'm short. But the realistic thing is, not every day will be perfect. Some days might have a gap, other days you might overcompensate, and then you'll have a series of days where it all adds up to overall nourishment. And it's the difference between you consistently nourishing yourself and you having those up and down, meaning it's like going on a diet, and this is the best example I can think of in the moment. It's like going on a diet and doing the diet for a month, hard, like perfect, and then the moment you slip up, everything goes to shit. or the moment you slip up, it's no longer effective, or you can't find the momentum. And because that momentum, you lose the momentum, then in your mind, your efforts are wasted. Versus recognizing that life is going to be such that you'll have up days, down days, up days, down days, and it's accumulation of those days overall that have an impact. And so, not every meal needs to do the most. That's my philosophy, and that's one I want to share with you. And the more honest we are about feeding ourselves, the less shame you carry, less shame people will carry around it. And the more we can talk about and share what nourishing ourselves look like, knowing that it will look different from one person to the other, and it will look different from day to day, even for you. So this is what I wanted to share for my friends who struggle to decide on what to eat. I see your pain, I understand your pain, and I hope putting this in perspective or sharing these things with you put things into perspective on the fact that you're doing the best you can. And that's all you can ask for. That's all anyone can ask for. So I hope that as you've watched this and as you come back to watch any of these videos, that you focus on nourishing yourself one moment, one bowl at a time. Okay? See you when I come back tomorrow.